Yay!
Yay! Okay, here's a notion that pops up in physics all the time, and this is called the mean free path. What we're really after is how long in distance can a molecule travel before it hits another molecule in the gas. So what we're going to do is start off with a really, really simple situation that's not quite real, and then we'll make it a little bit more real. So here's the idea. This is the mean free path. Usually in physics, this is called a lambda, and it's just a distance, like we said, that the particle can go before it hits something else. What does it mean to hit something else? Suppose these are like solid little spheres, each of them with radius r. This guy can run through a tunnel and not hit anybody until it hits someone that's inside the tunnel. How big can this little tunnel be? This little tunnel, it has to be 2r in radius, right? So whenever the condition that it's going to hit something else over here is that it has to get within 2r of that other particle. So before it hits, what we can say is it's run down a tunnel that's got a certain volume. And that volume is given by the length, which is the mean free path, lambda, which is also, we're not going to use this too much now, but just stick in the back of your heads. The mean free path is the speed of the particle times the time. We're assuming the speed is constant. So it's just the speed times time of the particle. So the volume is just going to be the distance, that lambda, times the area of that cross-section, right, with a radius of 2r. That's going to be the condition that this thing can travel freely. All right. So let's figure out what that is. This volume, the volume of this little cylinder, I'll call it V sub c. What is the volume of that little cylinder? Well, we said it's going to be lambda times the area on the end. Okay, so that's just going to be lambda times, what is the area? It's just going to be pi r squared, pi radius squared, but the radius is 2r. So this is going to be 4 pi r squared. Okay, there we go. So this is going to be, that's the volume of this little tunnel before this particle hits another particle. Okay. Now, in this tube, let's just say we have a tube. We have a little tunnel of a certain size. How many particles are going to be in that tunnel? Okay, let's think about that. Normally, now, the number of particles in a volume VC, what is that going to be? Well, it's just going to be the density of the particles times that volume, right? That'll give me the number of particles that are in that volume. So this is just going to be, there's going to be lots of n's. What do I call it? Oh, let's call it like this. Let's call it the number of particles in the cylinder. All right. The number of particles in the cylinder is just going to be the density of particles in the overall volume times the volume of that little cylinder. Times VC. Okay. So this is just going to be N over V times lambda 4 pi r squared, right? But here's the catch. How many particles do we want in that volume? We want that to be 1, because this is the mean free path between collisions. If there's any particles in that tube, we're going to have a collision, right? So we set this equal to 1. 1 collision. That's the trick. Okay, so now we can solve for lambda. So that means that the distance, the average distance between the collisions, if I solve this for lambda, is just going to be what? It's just going to be V over n times 4 pi r squared. Okay, cool. But V over N, we know what that is. Let's use the ideal gas law. So for a gas, we know that PV is NKT, right? Writing it in the physics way, because we do want sort of the total number of particles. So what is V over N? So V over N, what is that going to be? That's going to be V over N is KT over P. So that means that our lambda is going to be KT over 4 pi r squared times the pressure. Very nice. Okay, that sounds like we're kind of done, right? So if we know the pressure, like in 1 atmosphere, say in a room or something like that, and we know the temperature in the room, if we know the size of these particles, then we should be good to go. But there's one more complicating factor, right? This is almost too simple of a model because I've only got one thing moving. The only thing moving was this original particle. Over here, that's the only thing moving. You know that it's going to be a little bit less than this because on the average, all the other particles are going to be moving too, right? So it might be that one of these particles is going to be moving. Let's draw a couple of these particles. Maybe one of these. Here's another one. So maybe this one is traveling that way. This one is traveling that way, right? So I'm going to have like a, if this is particle 1 and particle 2, this is going to be V1 and V2. Should be an arrow. What's important is that I want the relative velocity of these, right? If you're riding along with particle 1, what's important is the velocity of 2 with respect to 1. And how do you get the relative velocity? You subtract the 2. So this is going to be, looking back at the way we used to do vector addition, this is going to be V2 minus V1. And that is our relative velocity. That should kind of make sense, right? If they're both, like if 1 is headed to the right and up and 2 is headed to the left and up, then according to particle 1, particle 2 is sort of coming at it. So that should kind of make sense. Okay, so what we really want in this formula is, and that also means that lambda's been cut short. Lambda should be shorter than that because of this relative velocity. They're going to collide sooner, right? That tube is going to be a shorter length because these particles really are coming at each other. So how do we get that? How do we kind of average all these things out? Okay, so VREL, the relative velocity is V2 minus V1, right? Well, here's a trick. This is how we do this a lot. This is in 3 dimensions. These are, maybe 3-dimensional vectors. So let's look at something that at first you might think, why are we looking at that? Let's look at the square of the velocity, and then we'll get back to the relative velocity at the end. So let's look at the relative velocity squared. Okay, so that's just going to be the magnitude of the relative velocity squared. Okay, so that's just going to be V2 minus V1, dotted with V2 minus V1. Right, that's what that really means. And if we carry out this dot product, what do we get? V2, so that's just going to be V2 squared plus V1 squared, and then I'm going to have a minus 2 times V2 dot V1. Okay, so that's how we carry out that dot product. Let's look at that. Remember, this is going to be averaged. What we want is we want the average, because there's going to be lots of these moving around with arbitrary velocities, right? There's 10 to the 27th particles or whatever. There could be thousands of moles of these things all moving around. So what we're going to want is sort of on the average. So this is going to be, we can use the idea that the sum, I got to phrase it right? The sum of the averages is the same as the average of the sums in this case, because it's the same sample on both sides. So this is just going to be individual means. But look at that, v2.v1. These are arbitrary directions, right? So on the average, what is the angle? Remember, v2.v1, that'll get you v2v1 times the angle between v2, v1. But what's the average angle between v2 and v1? If these things are flying around all over the place, that average angle, it's the same, it could be the same angle in any direction. So the average of that cosine theta all the way around is just going to give you 0. Because on the average, the directionality really doesn't matter, is a way to think about it. So that term is just going to go away. And so what we've got is v, the average relative velocity is just going to be v2 squared plus v1 squared, those averages. But then it doesn't really matter which one is v1 and which one is v2, because we're averaging over all these particles. So this really is just going to be 2v squared. And individual particles average velocity squared. So now that we have these quantities, now take the square root. So this is sort of a trick. So now take the square root to get back to what we really want, which is the relative velocity is just going to be square root of 2 times our individual v, which is what we had back up at the top. So all we have to do to go from, if we had v average, to go from v average to relative velocity, all we have to do is just divide by square root of 2. Or in other words, multiply by square root of 2 to get the relative velocity. Okay, so in our formula up there, that lambda should have a square root of 2 in it, and it should be at the bottom, right? Because lambda was v times t. So in order to go from v to v relative, I need to divide by square root of 2. So this means that our real lambda, taking into account the relative velocity of these things, the lambda should be kt over 4 pi r squared p times the square root of 2. Okay. That's a terrible box. Let me see if I can make that a little bit better. That's a little better. All right. And then now when you plug numbers in, let's just say there's a massive air in a room. So you can put in your K. T is like 300 Kelvin, right? Let's say that R, an average size, I don't know, this. Let's suppose it's 2, let's write it like this, 0.2 nanometers. That's going to be sort of an average radius for a molecule of, or a molecule of gas like an N or an O or something like that. And then pressure is just ordinary atmospheric pressure, just say 10 to the 5th. So T is 300 K, P is 10 to the 5th. Okay, you plug all those numbers in, and what you get is you get a lambda. What did I get? It's something like 58 nanometers. That's kind of an interesting number. So in an ordinary gas, what this means is that the average distance a molecule can go before hitting another molecule is going to be something like, this was something like 150 times the molecule's own size, which should sort of jive with the way that you feel that gases should be like anyway, right? They're sort of widely separated molecules that aren't like exactly sticking together, that they're not, packed so closely together. They can travel on the average 150 times their own size before colliding with something else. We'll keep this in mind though, because once we talk about the speed of these molecules, then we can talk about T, we can talk about the average time between collisions, which is going to be kind of an interesting number, because that's just going to be our lambda divided by our speed. But anyway, getting the mean free path is sort of an interesting number here in thermodynamics, and we use it in physics. The notion of mean free path we use in physics all the time.